So this is the next part 4 of lecture on chapter 9. In here, in this slide, we will discuss inflation, right? So we have already defined inflation as the increase in the general price level, right? Price of goods and services on an average increases, and this is bad for us because higher prices will reduce our real income based on purchasing power of money, right? If price is higher, the same money will buy less goods and services. So that is the purchasing power of money, and it will decline if there is inflation. And then now we measure, the US government measure inflation with this consumer price index, right? CPI, and CPI is defined as it is the ratio. It's a price indicator. It shows change in price in the current year or a particular year compare with reference to a base year, right? So the CPI now is this price of most recent market basket. Most recent market basket in the particular year. This is the year where we are calculating, for which we are calculating CPI, and then cost of the same market basket. This market basket in the base year, which is 1982-1984, right? The official CPI measures with this base year 82-84. So you see this market basket is the same. So we measure cost of this market basket in the particular year and in the base year, and then define and then multiply with what, 100 to make it percentage. Now we can measure inflation. Inflation is the percentage change in the price level, the percentage change in the CPI, right? Because CPI is measuring the price level. So suppose this is CPI in 2003, and this CPI is in 2002. So so the percentage increase in CPI between 2003 and 2002 we measure as what? As the difference between the two CPI divided by the CPI of 2002, right? And then multiply by 100, 2.8. So the CPI increased by 2.8 between year 2003, this one, and year 2002, this one. So inflation is 2.8. So when you read newspaper, when they are telling you that inflation based on CPI, inflation measured based on percentage change in CPI, this is what they mean, right? Now let us look at this. Look at this again. We compare inflation in the US from 1999 to 2009, and look in US, Italy, France, Germany, Japan. So look at the US inflation rate. This is the 3% rate, right? This is this dashed line. This is the 3% rate. So US inflation was consistently between 4%. This is the 4% rate, right? It was below 4%, and often below 3% during 1999 and 2009, right? Which was really good. Inflation was under control, so there was loss, so less pressure on consumers, less concern that the consumers will lose purchasing power of money. Now let us go to the next slide. Next slide, this one is telling us about inflation from 1990s to 2010. Look, since 1990s to 2010, CPI is less than 5%, actually less than 4%, as we have just seen. Inflation was a big problem in between 1972-73. Remember the oil shock? Again in 1978-79, that was another oil shock. Look at inflation rate, big jump in inflation, right? Okay, so we have those. So in those days, inflation was a problem, and dollar was what? For losing purchasing power. Real income of people were decreasing. They were unhappy, right? And they wanted change. So now there are two types of inflation: demand pull inflation and cost push inflation, right? Demand pull inflation is excess spending relative to output, right? So when people are spending more than what is produced, they will beat the price of the goods and services, and price will increase. This is demand pull inflation. This is increase in price because of higher demand. Often this excess spending is related with central bank issuing too much money. Then people will hold too much money. They have too much money. They want to buy more goods and services, and that may create a problem, right? So this is demand pull inflation, and another one is what, cost push inflation. Cost push inflation is due to a rise in per unit input cost, right? Cost push inflation, like the so when cost of any what resource increase, we know that cost of production increase. This higher cost will result in per unit input cost, right? And this will push up the price of goods and services. Whenever cost of production increases, producers will absorb part of that increase, but the other part they will pass the burden on to the consumers, and in the form of higher prices, and then the price will increase because of a what, push from cost side. And so this we call supply shocks. This is cost push inflation. Now, difficult to distinguish between inflation types, the demand pull and cost push inflation type, right? So one difference is that sustainability. When does inflation end? It seems that demand pull inflation will end when when demand drops back to the normal level, or when the government cuts down money supply, right? Because remember, one of the causes of demand pull inflation was was higher money supply from the central government. If the central government stopped doing that, then prices will come back to normal. But cost push inflation is not like that. Cost push inflation is relatively rare. We already know this is because of a higher input price. And this ends in a what? This ends in a recession, right? So output will decrease, unemployment will increase, income will decrease, right? And employment will decrease in a recession. So cost push inflation is rare, but is very damaging if it happens. Now, now inflation for all goods and services are not similar, not right. So some goods and services have higher inflation than other goods and services, like bread, oranges, lettuce. All of this is what? All of this is what? Without food, inflation. And energy goods, gasoline, natural gas. So this is what? So food and energy goods like gasoline, natural gas, they have higher inflation compared to the other goods that are bought and sold in the economy. So sometimes economists say that let us measure inflation without food and goods, right? Energy goods, and take a look at the real picture throughout the broad spectrum of goods and services in the economy. And that is when the economists measure core inflation. They will remove food and goods, energy goods from the basket, and then measure inflation, right? And to take a true picture of the inflation in the economy. Now, so this core inflation focus on goods that have more stable prices, right? By withdrawing the goods that have unstable prices. Now, the next thing we want to do is to talk about the redistribution effect of inflation. See, inflation and to discuss that, we want to see how inflation will transfer income from some people and give it to some other people. So it will redistribute income, right? Reduce income of some group, increase income of the other groups in the society. And inflation does this in an arbitrary way. We will show you soon. But before that, let us examine this nominal income and real income. Nominal income is the income that is not adjusted for inflation. So this we just go to the market, we collect information about output and price, and then calculate income, right? Calculate size of the or calculate GDP, calculate output, calculate national income, like that, as we have seen in chapter 7, without adjusting for price. But then the other method is real income. In real income, we have to use the CPI that we have learned to adjust for inflation, right? And adjust nominal income for real income, and then this will tell us how income has changed after controlling for change in prices. So look at that. Suppose price level rises by 6%. Then if Bob's nominal income rises by 6% also, his real income remains unchanged. See, all his gain in nominal income will be absorbed by increase in price level, right? So in real income terms, he doesn't earn much. But if nominal income rises by 10% and inflation is still 6%, how much will his real income change? So that will be a gain for Mr. Bob, right? And this is given given on page 182 in your textbook, right? Now let us discuss anticipated versus unanticipated income. So sometimes people make expectations about inflation and they are correct. So that is anticipated, right? And but sometimes they are not expecting any inflation, but inflation happens, right? Or they expect the rate of inflation they expect is actually lower than the inflation rate of inflation, actual inflation they face. So that is unanticipated inflation. Now they say that we have to adjust this. See, percentage change in real income will be what? Equal to percentage change in nominal income after we adjust for percentage change in price. So which is the last thing here is the inflation. We have to adjust nominal income for inflation to get real income. See? Okay. Now who is hurt by inflation? Fixed income receivers, real incomes fall. See, who is hurt by inflation? Fixed income receivers, real incomes fall. So these people, when these are like students and retired people, salaried people, right, who have a fixed income every month. Now, when there is inflation, purchasing power of the dollars that they earn will decrease, and they will suffer as a reduction in purchasing power. So they will then now, because they can buy less goods and services with the money that they have, their standard of living will also decrease. So fixed income receivers will suffer a loss of living standard, loss of real income because of inflation. Then also the other group that will lose because of inflation is what? Savers, right? Value of accumulated savings deteriorate, right? You save money in the bank, but then you earn some interest also, but then you see that at the end of the year your real income did not change. Because you have to adjust when you adjust your nominal income for the increase in interest for inflation, you see your real income remains unchanged. Look at that. In here they give an example. You have saved $1,000 at 6% interest rate and get 1,060 at the end of 1 year, right? But suppose inflation is 13%, so now you have to adjust your 1,060, right, for 13% interest by dividing that 1,060 with 1.13, and then you see that actually in real income, which is income after controlling for interest, your income will be 938. So actually you have less than what you had before, right? You get some interest, that is a gain, but that gain is taken away. Even the principal is reduced because of this high inflation. That is how inflation is harmful. Inflation reduces purchasing power.